The morning I woke up wearing a wedding dress wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was how desperately I wanted everyone to believe I was the bride. If you're wondering how a guy with a normal job, a loving girlfriend, and absolutely no intention of changing his life ended up standing in front of a mirror blushing beneath a white veil, stay with me. Because even I still can't explain the moment everything changed. A year ago, I laughed whenever my girlfriend, Emma, joked that I'd look prettier than she did in a wedding dress. Every time she teased me, I'd roll my eyes and tell her she was impossible. She would just smile with that mysterious grin that always meant she had another idea waiting. Looking back, I should have been worried. Emma loved fashion more than anyone I'd ever met. She could spend hours comparing fabrics, makeup shades, hairstyles, and accessories. While I usually sat beside her pretending to care, something unexpected happened over time. I actually started paying attention. I noticed why one dress looked elegant while another looked playful. I learned why certain colors matched different skin tones. I even found myself offering opinions she genuinely appreciated. See, she'd laugh. You have better taste than half the women I know. I dismissed it as harmless fun. Then one rainy Saturday changed everything. Our power went out, our phones were nearly dead, and boredom took over the apartment. Emma suddenly disappeared into the bedroom before returning with a large storage box. I found something fun. Inside were dresses from college parties, old bridesmaid gowns, wigs, jewelry, heels, and enough makeup to fill an entire vanity. She looked at me with sparkling eyes. Just one picture. I immediately refused. She pouted dramatically. Please? Nobody will ever see it. I laughed. Absolutely not. She crossed her arms. You're scared. I am not scared. Then prove it. That one sentence echoed in my head. 5 minutes later, I was standing awkwardly while she zipped a soft pink dress behind my back. I expected to feel ridiculous. Instead, I couldn't stop laughing. Emma laughed even harder. You actually have amazing posture. She brushed a wig into place before adding light foundation and a little lipstick. When she finally turned the mirror toward me, I froze. I didn't see myself. I saw someone unfamiliar. Someone gentle. Someone strangely beautiful. The experience should have ended there. One photo. One joke. One afternoon. Instead, I secretly asked Emma if I could see the pictures again. She smiled without saying a word. That was the first moment my curiosity became stronger than my embarrassment. Over the next few weeks, what started as playful dress-up quietly became our private weekend tradition. Emma never pressured me. She simply invited me. Every Saturday, she'd teach me something new. How to walk naturally in heels. How to sit gracefully. How to smile with confidence. How to match earrings with a dress. I kept telling myself it was only for fun. But every Sunday night, I found myself looking forward to the next Saturday. The mirror stopped feeling like an enemy. Instead, it became a place where I kept discovering someone I never expected to meet. I still considered myself Emma's boyfriend. I still went to work every Monday wearing jeans and sneakers. Yet every weekend, I slowly became someone softer, calmer, happier. What terrified me wasn't the makeup. It wasn't the dresses. It was how natural everything began to feel. And then Emma said the one sentence that would completely change my future. I think it's time you tried on a real wedding dress. My heart stopped. I swallowed hard. A wedding dress? Emma nodded so casually that it almost made the question sound normal. Not because we're getting married tomorrow, she said with a teasing smile. Because every girl deserves to know how she feels wearing one at least once. I laughed nervously. I'm not a girl. I know, she replied softly. I'm just asking you to trust me. Trust. That single word carried more weight than I wanted to admit. Over the past few months, she'd never mocked me, never forced me, never made me feel ashamed. Every step had been my choice. Somehow, that made saying no even harder. A week later, a large white garment bag appeared in our apartment. You actually rented one? I asked. Emma grinned. No. My cousin owns a bridal boutique. She let me borrow a sample. The moment she unzipped the bag, my breath caught. Layers of soft white satin spilled onto the bed. Delicate lace sleeves shimmered beneath the light. Tiny pearls decorated the bodice, and a long veil rested carefully beside it. It looked beautiful, far more beautiful than anything I'd imagined. I reached out without thinking, letting the fabric slide through my fingers. It's so soft. Emma noticed the expression on my face, but didn't say anything. Instead, she simply whispered, "Whenever you're ready." I disappeared into the bedroom carrying the dress. Standing there alone, I stared at my reflection. What am I doing? Every logical part of my brain told me to hang the dress back up and walk away. But another part of me, the quiet voice that had been growing stronger every weekend, wanted to know. Slowly, I stepped into the gown. The corset tightened gently around my waist. The skirt flowed around my legs. Emma helped arrange the veil before taking a step back. Neither of us spoke. For several seconds, the apartment was completely silent. Then she smiled. I knew it. Knew what? You'd stop looking embarrassed. She was right. I wasn't embarrassed. I couldn't stop staring at myself. Instead of feeling ridiculous, I felt peaceful. It wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about discovering a version of myself I never knew existed. Emma picked up her phone. No pictures unless you say yes. Normally, I would have refused immediately. Instead, I surprised both of us. Maybe just one. That single photograph changed everything. Later that night, after removing the makeup and carefully hanging the dress back inside its bag, I couldn't sleep. I kept remembering the reflection, the smile, the strange excitement I'd felt. Around midnight, I quietly opened my phone. Emma had sent me the picture. I stared at it for nearly 20 minutes. I looked happy, not fake, not forced. Happy. The next morning, I accidentally caught myself searching online. How to walk gracefully, bridal hairstyles, beginner makeup tips, how to pose naturally in photographs. I slammed my laptop shut. What am I doing? The search history frightened me. Not because someone else might see it, because it proved I genuinely wanted to learn. Over the following month, our weekends became little lessons. Emma taught me how different foundations matched different skin tones, how to avoid smudging lipstick, how to blend eyeshadow naturally, how to wear jewelry without overdoing it. She even showed me breathing techniques that made walking in heels look effortless. Every lesson felt surprisingly satisfying. One evening, she handed me a notebook. Homework. I laughed. For what? Write down 3 things you learned about confidence this week. Confidence. She nodded. Not femininity. Confidence. That changed the way I looked at everything. The dresses weren't making me confident. Learning not to fear judgment was. Little by little, I stopped criticizing every tiny mistake. Instead of worrying whether I looked convincing, I focused on standing taller, smiling naturally, and accepting imperfections. Emma noticed the difference immediately. So what? I think you're ready. For what? She reached into her bag and placed a small invitation on the table. My stomach dropped. It was for a bridal makeover competition hosted by a local fashion academy. Participants would receive professional makeup, hairstyling, photography, and runway coaching. The shocking part? Contestants weren't limited by gender. Anyone could enter. No. My answer came instantly. Emma didn't argue. She simply slid the invitation closer. You don't have to compete. I'm definitely not. You could just experience it. I looked down at the invitation again. Professional stylists. Professional photographers. Professional bridal fashion. The thought terrified me. But it also awakened a curiosity I could no longer ignore. For 3 straight nights, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every excuse I made for refusing slowly fell apart. Finally, Emma asked one simple question. If nobody judged you, would you want to go? I opened my mouth to answer. Nothing came out, because deep inside, I already knew the truth, and admitting it would change everything. For the next 2 days, I carried that invitation everywhere. It stayed folded in my wallet while I went to work, bought groceries, answered emails, and pretended nothing was different. Every time I opened my wallet, The elegant gold lettering caught my eye, and my heart raced all over again. Emma never mentioned it. She never reminded me. That silence somehow made the decision even harder. On Friday evening, I walked into our apartment and found her reading on the couch. Without saying a word, I pulled the invitation from my wallet and placed it on the coffee table. She looked at it, then at me. "Does this mean?" I nodded slowly. "I'll go." Her smile wasn't loud or dramatic. It was warm. "I'm proud of you." The morning of the event, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. "What if everyone laughs? They're there to celebrate creativity," Emma said as she squeezed my hand. "Not to judge." "What if I can't do it? You've already done harder things." I wasn't convinced. When we arrived at the Fashion Academy, my confidence disappeared almost instantly. The lobby was full of contestants. Some were experienced performers. Some were fashion students. Some were couples. Others, like me, looked nervous enough to turn around and leave. I whispered, "I don't belong here." Emma leaned close. "Look around." I did. Nobody was staring at me. Nobody was laughing. Everyone was too busy worrying about themselves. For the first time, I realized something important. Most of my fear had never come from other people. It had come from my own imagination. A volunteer called my name. I followed her into the styling room. Rows of mirrors lined the walls. Bright lights surrounded every chair. Professional makeup artists moved with incredible speed, chatting happily as they worked. One stylist smiled at me. "So, you're our bride today." Bride. Hearing someone say it out loud made my cheeks burn. I guess so. She laughed kindly. "Relax. You're safe here." For the next 2 hours, I hardly recognized myself. They shaped my eyebrows, applied foundation with unbelievable precision, added soft pink blush, blended shimmering eyeshadow, placed delicate lashes that somehow looked natural. Another stylist carefully styled a long chestnut wig before securing it perfectly. Then came the dress. Not the same one Emma had borrowed. This one was even more breathtaking. Ivory satin, long lace sleeves, a fitted waist, a flowing skirt that shimmered every time I moved. When they finally placed the veil over my hair, the room became strangely quiet. "Ready?" the stylist asked. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. She slowly turned my chair toward the mirror. The reflection stole my breath. I couldn't find the nervous boyfriend who had walked into the academy. Instead, I saw a shy young bride blushing beneath a veil. Without realizing it, tears filled my eyes. The makeup artist noticed. "Oh no, don't cry yet." Everyone laughed gently. I laughed too, wiping away the tears as carefully as I could. I've just never seen myself like this. Emma walked into the room a few seconds later. She stopped in the doorway. Her eyes widened. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered, "You're beautiful." No joke. No teasing. Just honesty. That single compliment reached deeper than I expected. Not because she called me beautiful, because I believed she meant it. The photographer invited me onto the small studio stage. "I've never modeled before," I admitted. "Perfect," he smiled. "Beginners listen better." He showed me how to stand, how to relax my shoulders, how to angle my face toward the light, how to let the dress flow naturally. At first, every pose felt awkward. Then something unexpected happened. I stopped thinking. Instead of wondering how I looked, I focused on enjoying the moment. The camera flashed again and again. Each click made me a little more confident. The nervousness slowly melted away. After the photos, contestants gathered backstage before the friendly runway presentation. It wasn't really a competition anymore. It felt more like a celebration. People complimented each other's dresses, shared makeup tips, adjusted each other's veils. One older participant smiled at me. "First event." I nodded. "It shows." I felt embarrassed. Then she added, "Because your smile is real." That sentence stayed with me. When my number was called, my heart pounded louder than ever. The music started. The curtains opened. Bright lights flooded the runway. Hundreds of faces looked toward me. For one terrifying second, my feet refused to move. Then I remembered everything Emma had taught me. Stand tall. Breathe slowly. Smile with your eyes. One step, then another. The dress floated gently around me. The heels clicked softly against the floor. The audience remained silent. Not because they were judging me, because they were watching. Halfway down the runway, I stopped shaking. By the time I reached the end, I actually smiled. And, to my complete surprise, the audience applauded. Real applause. Not polite sympathy. Not awkward clapping. Warm, genuine applause. As I turned to walk back, I caught Emma standing near the stage. She wasn't filming. She wasn't taking pictures. She was simply watching me with tears in her eyes. In that moment, I realized this journey had stopped being about clothes long ago. It had become about courage. But I had no idea that someone unexpected had been sitting in that audience. Someone who recognized me instantly. And that one familiar face was about to turn my happiest day into the biggest challenge of my life. The applause was still echoing in my ears as I stepped backstage, my heart pounding with a strange mix of relief and excitement. For the first time in months, I wasn't worried about how I looked. I was simply happy that I hadn't run away. The photographers asked everyone to stay for the award ceremony and group photos. Contestants laughed together, fixing each other's veils and complimenting dresses. The atmosphere felt warm, supportive, and completely different from the terrifying scene I had imagined in my head. Emma wrapped her arms around me. You did it. I almost didn't, but you did. I smiled, feeling a confidence I'd never experienced before. Then someone called my name. Not my feminine nickname. My real name. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. Every muscle in my body froze. Slowly, I turned around. Standing near the entrance was Daniel, my best friend since college, the person who had known me for nearly 10 years. His eyes moved from my veil, to my makeup, to the wedding dress. Neither of us spoke. For several painfully long seconds, the entire room seemed silent. Finally, he walked toward me. I didn't expect to see you here. My throat went dry. I can explain. He looked at Emma, then back at me. You don't have to. I expected laughter. A joke. Confusion. Instead, he surprised me. I just wasn't expecting you to look this confident. That wasn't the reaction I'd prepared for. Emma gently excused herself, giving us space. Daniel folded his arms. So, are you okay? I blinked. That's your first question? He shrugged. If you're happy, that's what matters. The fear I'd carried for months suddenly felt much lighter. We sat together in the Academy Cafe after the event. Still wearing the bridal gown, I told him everything. The rainy afternoon, the first dress, the makeup lessons, the bridal photos, every weekend, every fear, every moment of doubt. He listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, he smiled. You know what I remember most about college?
What?
You were always pretending to be someone you weren't. I frowned. What do you mean? You acted tough because everyone expected you to. I looked away. He wasn't wrong. I've never seen you smile the way you smiled on that runway. His words stayed with me long after we left. On the drive home, Emma reached across the center console and held my hand. Proud of yourself? I stared out the window. A little. She laughed. Only a little? I still don't know what all of this means. You don't have to know today. That answer comforted me more than any explanation could have. Life slowly returned to normal, at least on the surface. I still went to work every weekday, still wore my usual clothes, still met friends, still looked like the same person everyone had always known. But inside, something had changed. The fear that once controlled every decision had begun to disappear. One evening, Emma placed a neatly wrapped gift on the dining table. What's this? Open it. Inside was a beautiful white jewelry box. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. A delicate pearl necklace rested inside. Simple, elegant, beautiful. I looked up. For me? She nodded. I wanted you to have something that wasn't borrowed. Carefully, she fastened it around my neck. The cool pearls rested gently against my skin. I couldn't stop touching them. It wasn't about the necklace. It represented acceptance. A reminder that this journey wasn't just a game anymore. A week later, another surprise arrived. Emma handed me a small envelope. What now? She smiled mischievously. Read it. Inside was an invitation from her cousin's bridal boutique. They were organizing a charity bridal fashion showcase. Several former participants from the academy had been invited back, including me. I stared at the invitation for nearly a minute. They actually remembered me? Emma nodded proudly. Apparently your photos became surprisingly popular. My stomach flipped. You showed them?
No.
She laughed. The academy did. They used my pictures? You signed the permission form. I had completely forgotten. Curiosity got the better of me. That night, I searched for the event online. There they were. Professional photographs from the academy. One image after another. Walking, smiling, holding my bouquet, looking over my shoulder beneath the veil. Thousands of people had already viewed them. Hundreds of positive comments filled the page. Elegant. What a beautiful smile. So graceful. Incredible confidence. Only a handful of people even mentioned that I was male. Most simply admired the photographs. I couldn't believe it. For months I'd imagined endless ridicule. Instead, strangers were complimenting my confidence. Emma watched me reading the comments. Told you. I don't understand. What? Why are people so kind? She smiled softly. Because confidence is contagious. The charity showcase felt much less frightening than the academy. This time, I wasn't hiding behind fear. I actually looked forward to it. Backstage, several contestants recognized me. You're the shy bride from the academy. One woman hugged me before I could respond. You inspired my brother to enter next year. Another participant smiled. My husband saw your photos and finally stopped being embarrassed about fashion. Those words stunned me. I had spent months believing I was learning something for myself. I never imagined my journey could encourage someone else. As the event organizer gathered everyone together, she made one announcement that changed the entire evening. We have a special finale planned. Everyone looked curious. She continued smiling. Our closing walk will feature real couples. My eyes immediately found Emma across the room. She smiled back. Then the organizer looked directly at us. You two will close the show together. My heart skipped a beat. Emma squeezed my hand. And suddenly, I realized, the next time I walked onto a runway, I wouldn't be walking alone. Emma looked at me with the same calm smile she had worn since the beginning of this journey. You don't have to do it. I laughed nervously. You know that's impossible now. She tilted her head. Why? Because if I say no, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened. She smiled. Exactly. The stylists led us into separate dressing rooms. Unlike the first bridal event, this showcase was far more elaborate. There were professional designers, photographers, florists, and makeup artists preparing every couple for the finale. When my garment bag arrived, I expected another elegant white gown. Instead, the zipper revealed something breathtaking. Layers of soft ivory satin, hand-sewn lace, tiny crystal details that sparkled beneath the lights. A cathedral-length veil. It looked like something from a fairy tale. The designer walked over with a warm smile. This dress was chosen specifically for you. For me? She nodded. We studied your runway photos. I stared at her in disbelief. You move differently from most models. You're naturally gentle. We designed this gown to match that. Nobody had ever described me that way before. As they carefully dressed me, I noticed something unexpected. I wasn't trembling anymore. Months ago, every zipper, every brushstroke of makeup, every glance in the mirror filled me with anxiety. Now, I was simply enjoying the process. The makeup artist smiled while applying the final touch of blush. You've changed. I have. You spent your first event apologizing every 5 minutes. I laughed. I really did, didn't I? This time you're smiling. When they finally placed the veil over my hair, I stood before the mirror alone. The reflection felt familiar now. Not because I believed I had become someone else, but because I had stopped fighting the parts of myself I'd spent years hiding. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Ready? It was Emma. The coordinator allowed us 1 minute together before the finale. When she stepped into the room, my breath caught. She wore an elegant champagne-colored evening gown that perfectly complemented my bridal dress. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly whispered, "I don't think I've ever seen you this happy." I smiled. "I don't think I have either." She adjusted a tiny strand of hair beneath my veil. "You know what my favorite part is?" "What?" "You stopped asking if you looked convincing." She was right. At some point, that question had disappeared completely. Now I only cared whether I felt comfortable. The music began outside. One by one, couples walked onto the runway. The audience applauded after every entrance. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the music. The coordinator raised a hand. "You two are next." Emma squeezed my fingers. "No matter what happens out there." I finished her sentence. We walked together. She smiled. The curtains opened. Bright lights poured across the stage. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "And now, our closing couple." We stepped forward together. For a brief moment, everything disappeared. The audience, the cameras, the lights. The only thing I could hear was the soft sound of our footsteps. Emma never rushed. She matched my pace perfectly. Every step felt effortless. Halfway down the runway, the audience erupted into applause. Not because of the dress, not because of the makeup, but because they could see the genuine happiness on our faces. The photographer asked us to stop at the end of the runway. He smiled. "Look at each other." We did. "Closer." Emma laughed softly. "One more step." I could feel my cheeks turning red beneath the makeup. "There," the photographer said. "Perfect." The flash exploded several times. Those photographs would later become my favorite memories, not because I looked like a bride, but because I looked completely free. After the showcase ended, dozens of people approached us. Some asked for pictures. Others thanked us. One middle-aged man stood quietly waiting until the crowd disappeared. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," he began. "Of course. My son has always loved fashion, but he's terrified of what people think." I listened carefully. "He saw your academy photos online." I smiled politely. The man continued. "For the first time, he told us who he really is." My eyes widened. "I don't know where his journey will lead," he said, but seeing someone smile without shame gave him courage. I couldn't speak. The words hit me harder than any applause ever could. After he left, Emma noticed the tears in my eyes. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "I thought this journey was changing me. And it's changing other people too." She wrapped her arm around mine as we walked toward the parking lot. That night we sat quietly on our apartment balcony. Neither of us looked at our phones. Neither of us talked about the event. We simply watched the city lights. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "If I asked you 1 year ago whether you'd ever walk a bridal runway, I would have laughed. And today?" I looked down at the pearl necklace resting against my dress. "Today? I'd probably ask when the next one is." We both laughed. Just as I was about to go inside, my phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. And another. Within seconds, dozens began pouring in. The event organizers had posted the finale photographs. One image stood above all the others. Emma and I smiling at each other beneath the lights. The comments were arriving faster than I could read them. Thousands of likes. Hundreds of shares. Messages from people around the world saying the same thing in different words. Your confidence made me smile. Thank you for being yourself. This story gave me hope. I stared at the screen in complete disbelief. I had started this journey terrified that the world would laugh at me. Instead, the world was listening. But I had no idea that the growing attention would soon bring an opportunity that neither Emma nor I had ever imagined. One that would test whether my confidence was strong enough to exist beyond the safety of a runway and into everyday life. A week after the charity showcase, life felt strangely quiet again. I went back to my normal routine. Alarm at 7. Coffee before work. Traffic. Meetings. grocery shopping on the way home. On the outside, everything looked exactly as it had a year earlier. But inside, I wasn't the same person anymore. Every evening, my phone continued filling with notifications from the runway photos. I tried to ignore them at first, but curiosity always won. There were messages from people thanking me for sharing my confidence. Some simply said the pictures made them smile. Others shared their own stories about overcoming fear, learning makeup, or finally embracing hobbies they'd hidden for years. I read every single one. One night, Emma noticed me smiling at my phone. "Good comments." I nodded. I never imagined strangers could be so supportive. She laughed. "You spent months expecting the worst." I know. And what happened? The complete opposite. She leaned against my shoulder. "Sometimes fear tells louder stories than reality." Those words stayed with me. A few days later, an email arrived from the Fashion Academy. At first I assumed it was another thank you message. It wasn't. The director wanted to meet me. In person. I almost deleted the email, convinced it had been sent by mistake. Emma read it twice. "They definitely mean you." I don't understand why. Only one way to find out. The following Saturday, we returned to the academy where everything had begun. Walking through those doors felt completely different. Months earlier, I had entered shaking with fear. Now I walked in carrying confidence I never thought I'd possess. The director welcomed us warmly. She placed several printed photographs on the table. Every one of them was from my runway appearances. "I've watched your transformation from the beginning," she said. I smiled awkwardly. "I've only worn dresses a handful of times." She shook her head. "I'm not talking about clothing." I looked confused. "I'm talking about confidence." She pointed toward the first photograph from my very first bridal event. "You can see fear in your eyes." Then she placed my latest runway photo beside it. "And here," she smiled, "you finally believe in yourself." I stared at the two pictures. She was right. The difference wasn't the makeup. It wasn't the dress. It was the expression. The academy director folded her hands. "We'd like to invite you back." "As a model?" She smiled. "As a mentor." I nearly laughed. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. I've only been doing this for a few months. Exactly. She leaned forward. "Experienced models teach technique." She paused. "You teach courage." For several seconds, I couldn't answer. "Me? Helping others?" The idea felt impossible. "I don't know enough." She smiled knowingly. "That's exactly what every beginner says." Emma gently nudged my arm beneath the table. I knew that little signal. She believed I could do it. After a long silence, I finally nodded. "I'll try." The first workshop took place 2 weeks later. There were only 8 participants. Some were young, some much older. Every one of them looked exactly the way I had looked during my first event. Terrified. One man refused to look in the mirror. Another kept apologizing every time someone adjusted his makeup. A young woman quietly admitted she'd never worn heels before. I recognized every emotion immediately, because I'd lived them. Instead of giving speeches, I simply shared my own story. I told them about the rainy afternoon, the first dress, the shaking hands, the fear, the embarrassment, the first genuine smile in the mirror. Nobody interrupted. Nobody laughed. Several people wiped away tears. Afterward, one participant approached me. I thought I was the only one who felt this scared. I smiled. So did I. By the end of the afternoon, something incredible happened. The room sounded completely different. People who had barely spoken earlier were now complimenting one another, helping adjust wigs, sharing makeup brushes, laughing together. Confidence had spread through the room almost naturally. As everyone prepared for a small practice photo session, the photographer asked me to stand beside the newest participant. She whispered, "I can't smile." I remembered saying almost the exact same words months earlier. "You don't need to force one." What do I do? Think about the moment you stop trying to impress everyone. She looked confused. I've never had that moment. I smiled gently. Maybe today is the first. The camera clicked. Her nervous expression slowly softened. Then, she smiled. A real smile. The photographer lowered his camera. There it is. She looked at the photo and immediately covered her face. I actually like it. I couldn't help smiling too. That simple sentence reminded me of my own first picture. As the workshop ended, the academy director handed me a small envelope. What's this? A thank you. Inside wasn't money. It was a certificate recognizing me as a volunteer confidence mentor. My throat tightened. Just months earlier, I had been afraid to wear makeup in front of one person. Now people trusted me to encourage others. Emma wrapped her arm around mine as we left the building. Proud. I looked down at the certificate. I think this is the first time I'm proud of myself. She squeezed my hand. You earned it. Driving home, I realized something unexpected. The biggest transformation hadn't happened when I first wore a bridal gown. It hadn't happened on the runway. It hadn't happened in front of a camera. It happened the moment I stopped measuring my worth by other people's expectations. I thought that was the end of my journey. I was wrong, because waiting in my inbox that evening was an invitation from a national bridal exhibition. And this time, they weren't inviting me as a contestant. They wanted me to open the entire show. I read the email 3 times before I believed it. A national bridal exhibition. Hundreds of designers. Thousands of visitors. Professional photographers. Media coverage. And they wanted me to open the show. I looked at Emma, then back at the screen. This has to be a prank. She gently took the laptop from my hands and read the message herself. When she finished, she smiled. It's real. I leaned back in my chair. Why me? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened one of the photos from my very first runway and placed it beside the newest one. Look. I smiled. I know. I've changed. You haven't just changed. She pointed at the second picture. You finally look comfortable being yourself. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The invitation wasn't exciting because it was a fashion event. It was exciting because someone believed my story deserved to be seen. Still, the exhibition would be far bigger than anything I'd ever done. What if I freeze? Emma laughed softly. You asked that before every single runway. And you never froze. A month later, we arrived at the exhibition center. The building was enormous. Models hurried through backstage hallways. Designers adjusted gowns. Hairstylists rushed between dressing stations. Photographers tested lighting. Everything moved with incredible speed. For a brief moment, the old fear returned. I don't belong here. Before Emma could answer, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around. It was the academy director. She smiled proudly. You absolutely belong here. She introduced me to several designers. To my surprise, many of them already knew who I was. I loved your charity showcase. You have such natural expressions. Thank you for encouraging beginners. Every compliment felt surreal. Months ago, I had been hiding from mirrors. Now professionals were shaking my hand. Backstage, the stylist unzipped my gown. This dress was unlike any I'd worn before. Elegant ivory silk, long illusion sleeves, delicate floral embroidery that looked almost hand-painted. It wasn't flashy. It was graceful. Exactly the kind of dress that didn't need to shout to be noticed. While the makeup artist worked, she smiled at me through the mirror. Nervous? A little. She laughed. I've worked with professional models for years. I looked at her curiously. You know who gets the most nervous? Beginners? She shook her head. The experienced ones. Really? They have something to prove. She carefully brushed a little blush across my cheeks. You don't. That sentence relaxed me instantly. When everything was finished, I stood before the full-length mirror. The reflection no longer surprised me. Instead, it reminded me how far I'd come. I adjusted the veil myself. A simple action. Yet months ago, I wouldn't even have touched one. Emma entered the dressing room. Her eyes lit up immediately. I think this might be my favorite dress. I smiled. It feels different. How? I don't feel like I'm pretending anymore. She reached over and straightened my necklace. That's because you stopped performing. The announcer's voice echoed backstage. Opening model, please prepare. My heartbeat quickened. The music began. I closed my eyes for one deep breath. Then another. I remembered the frightened boyfriend who couldn't even look into a mirror. I remembered shaking while putting on lipstick for the first time. I remembered believing everyone would laugh. I quietly smiled. How wrong I had been. The curtains opened. Bright white lights flooded the runway. The audience stretched farther than I could see. Thousands of faces. Hundreds of cameras. Every instinct told me to panic. Instead, I took one calm step forward. Then another. The hall became completely silent. Only the gentle sound of my heels echoed through the room. Halfway down the runway, I noticed something unexpected. People weren't staring because I was different. They were admiring the dress, the confidence, the presentation, exactly as they would with any other model. At the end of the runway, I stopped beneath the spotlight. The photographer smiled. "Hold that." Flash, flash, flash. I turned gracefully. The veil floated softly behind me. The audience erupted into applause, louder than I'd ever heard before. As I walked backstage again, I couldn't stop smiling. One young assistant ran toward me. "You were amazing." I laughed. I was terrified. She grinned. It didn't show. The exhibition continued all afternoon. Between runway segments, visitors explored the displays. Several people politely asked for photos. Others thanked me for sharing my story online. One elderly woman approached me slowly. She held my hand for a moment before speaking. "My husband passed away last year." I listened quietly. He always wanted to learn sewing and fashion, but he was too afraid of what people would say. She smiled through tears. I wish he could have seen someone living without that fear. I squeezed her hand gently. I hope he knew he wasn't alone. She nodded. I think he does now. After she walked away, I stood there silently for several moments. That conversation affected me more than any applause. It reminded me that confidence isn't only about the people who find it. Sometimes, it's about the people who never had the chance. That evening, as the exhibition came to an end, the event organizer gathered everyone together. "We've chosen today's Audience Inspiration Award." I assumed it would go to one of the famous professional models. Instead, she looked directly at me. "The award goes to someone who reminded us that beauty begins with authenticity and kindness." The audience applauded once again. As I walked onto the stage to accept the small crystal trophy, I spotted Emma standing near the front row. She wasn't clapping the loudest. She wasn't cheering the hardest. She was simply smiling with tears in her eyes, the same smile she'd worn on that rainy afternoon when she first handed me a simple pink dress. Without that moment, none of this would have happened. I accepted the trophy, looked out across the audience, and realized something incredible. I had started this journey, hoping to discover a new version of myself. Instead, I had discovered the courage to be completely honest with the person I'd always been. And just when I thought the story had finally reached its happiest ending, Emma quietly whispered something on the drive home that made my heart race all over again. "I've been keeping one last surprise." I turned toward her. She smiled mischievously. "I think it's finally time you tried on my actual wedding dress." I looked at Emma, convinced she was joking. "Your actual wedding dress?" She nodded with a smile that instantly brought me back to the rainy afternoon when she had first challenged me to wear a simple pink dress. "This isn't another fashion event," she said softly. "It's something I've wanted to do for a long time." I swallowed. "Why?" She reached across the table and held my hands. "Because every step we've taken together has brought us closer, not farther apart. That dress represents one of the happiest days of my life. I want to share that happiness with you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It wasn't about the gown. It was about what it meant. The following weekend, we drove to her parents' house. Her mother welcomed us with a warm hug before leading us upstairs to a spare bedroom. In the corner stood a large white preservation box tied with a satin ribbon. Emma carefully untied the ribbon. Inside rested the dress she had worn on our wedding day. It looked even more beautiful than I remembered. The delicate lace had been perfectly preserved. The tiny pearl buttons still shimmered. The veil was folded neatly beside it, untouched for years. Emma lifted the gown with incredible care. I've always hoped it would make someone smile again. My heart was racing. I quietly stepped into the bedroom to change. As the zipper closed behind me, I stared at myself in the mirror. This time, I didn't see a nervous beginner. I didn't even see someone trying to look like a bride. I simply saw myself. A version of myself that had finally stopped running from curiosity, kindness, and confidence. When I opened the bedroom door, Emma was waiting. She froze. Her mother looked at me with tears forming in her eyes. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Emma whispered, "I knew it." I smiled. Knew what? That one day you'd stop worrying about whether you deserved to feel beautiful. Her mother walked closer and gently adjusted the veil. You both remind me that love isn't about fitting expectations. She smiled warmly. It's about helping each other become more confident. Those words meant more than she could ever know. Emma suggested one final photo. Not for social media. Not for an event. Not for anyone else. Just for us. We stood together in the garden behind her parents' house. The afternoon sun filtered gently through the trees. The photographer, an old family friend, didn't ask us to pose dramatically. Instead, he simply said, "Talk to each other." So we did. We laughed about the first crooked line of lipstick Emma had ever drawn on my face. We remembered the first pair of heels I could barely walk in. We joked about how many times I almost backed out of the academy. Every laugh was genuine. Every smile was real. Click, click, click. The camera quietly captured moments that didn't need perfect poses. They only needed honesty. After the session, the photographer showed us a preview. There was one picture that immediately stood out. Emma was looking at me. I was looking back at her. Neither of us noticed the camera. We were simply smiling. The photographer smiled. "This isn't my best photograph because of the lighting." He pointed at the image. "It's my best photograph because neither of you is pretending." Months later, that single picture found its way into a small frame on the bookshelf in our living room. Visitors occasionally noticed it. Some asked questions. Some simply smiled. I no longer felt the need to explain every detail. I had learned that not everyone needed to understand my journey for it to be meaningful. One quiet evening, I sat alone with a cup of coffee and looked back through every photograph from the past year. The first blurry selfie. The borrowed pink dress. The bridal academy. The charity runway. The national exhibition. The mentoring workshops. The smiles. The tears. The friendships. The confidence. Every picture told the same story. Not about becoming someone else, but about discovering parts of myself that fear had hidden for far too long. Emma walked into the room and sat beside me. "What are you thinking about?" I smiled. That none of this was ever really about dresses. She nodded. "I know. It was about believing I was allowed to explore without being ashamed." She rested her head against my shoulder. And I hope anyone watching our story remembers one thing. What's that? You don't have to change who you are overnight. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to become perfect. Sometimes the bravest step is simply allowing yourself to be curious. Emma smiled. I couldn't have said it better. I looked one last time at the framed photograph on the shelf. The shy boyfriend who once laughed at the idea of wearing a dress felt like a distant memory. His place had been taken by someone more confident, more compassionate, and far less afraid of being seen. That was the greatest transformation of all. If someone had told me a year earlier that I'd one day blush while wearing a bridal gown, smile at my own reflection, walk confidently down runways, encourage others to embrace their creativity, and treasure a photograph of myself dressed as a bride, I would have laughed in disbelief. Now, I simply smiled. Because every unexpected step had led me to a happier, more authentic version of myself. And whenever I catch my reflection now, I don't ask, "Who is that?" I smile back and quietly think, "Thank you for finally having the courage to stop hiding."